it's this constant balance between desire of what you want, but also like, this is what we're naturally doing.
Yeah.
And as founders, like, it really is going to flow out of us.
What would happen if we just told the truth?
Welcome to TruthWorks, where we dig into the nitty-gritty of leadership and work.
And what needs to change? I'm Jessica Neal.
And I'm Patty McCord.
Our journey together started in HR, but trust us, it's evolved into something wild, honest, and well, a bit rebellious.
So throw out the handbook. We're here to redefine rules to work for us, not against us.
Let's dive into another episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of TruthWorks. I'm Jessica Neal. Patty is out for personal reasons, but I have the pleasure to be with one of my dear friends and colleagues from Netflix, Maya Watson, and her colleague, Lexi Nisita. So Maya and I worked together at Netflix, and she was one of my favorite people, an extraordinary executive. And I would try to pry her for information about Oprah, because she worked with Oprah for a long time. But Oprah, she's good. She doesn't tell
I'm an open
anything.
book. If you want to know, I'll tell you.
You were good back then. I was trying to get some dirt, but maybe there wasn't any to give.
There was no dirt.
Yeah.
She's pretty good.
Yeah. And you've worked with the Obamas. You obviously worked with me and Reed at Netflix. You're an extraordinary PR, marketing, brand person. But now you've gone off and started your own thing. And I remember, because I always keep an eye on my favorites. And so I was keeping an eye on you. And I remember when you left, and then you wrote this posting on LinkedIn about leaving Netflix. And I remember talking to you when you were thinking through these things.
I remember. I almost joined your team. Do you remember?
Yes, I do. Because I did not want you to leave Netflix. And I was like, just work for me on my team.
You were like HR. And I was like, wait a minute. Maybe.
Yeah. And you could have done it. You would have been extraordinary at it, which I think is maybe why you're doing what you're doing now, right? Yeah. Tell everybody a little bit about that LinkedIn post that you did about leaving Netflix. And then tell us what's pushed you to do what you and Lexi are doing now.
Yeah.
And introduce Lexi a little bit as well.
Yeah. Well, Lexi and I met at Netflix. I mean, Netflix was like, I don't think I've even fully comprehended how important Netflix was in my life. I was really sad to leave, but also felt like it was the right time to go. And so when I wrote the letter on LinkedIn, I kind of just like poured my heart out about how this place, and specifically the culture, which is why like I have so much reverence for you and what Patty have done and you guys are doing, because the culture changed my life. Like I truly didn't know what I was capable of until I got into that culture. I can really say did like some of the best work of my life at Netflix. The culture not only transformed me as like a professional and a leader, but just like as a person. There's so many things that we talk about every day as we're trying to build something that we're pulling from those principles.
Right.
And so I really felt like it was our competitive advantage in so many ways, that if you got to be a part of it, you just know how special it felt to be like in that environment. So yeah, I mean, I was just
was our competitive advantage.
Yeah. Like that's what it felt like. And I remember the first day walking into Netflix, you know, you had heard about it at that point, because I came in like 2016, 2017. So original content was already happening, but it was like the scale is like, we're in the middle of scale. And I felt like I was walking into NASA. It like the vibration in the building felt so different.
Yeah.
And it was like, I don't know what's happening here, but I've never felt anything like this. I've never seen anything like this. I was so intimidated when I started. Like, how am I going to like find my way here? But then, you know, slowly but surely, the way we were so intentional about helping people understand the culture and like, what are our principles and who are we and how do we move and why does this matter to us and all of these things. And then the next thing you know, it's like, you're doing the best work of your life and you're having the best time with the best people. So it still goes down for me as like the great places to work, the great places to be. And I think as we're building something, we really care about that. Like, I don't think if we hadn't been at Netflix, we wouldn't have cared so much
Right.
about prioritizing environment this early. It's like
Right.
5 of us.
Well, tell us about, what you're doing. So
Yeah.
you leave, you write this heartfelt letter on LinkedIn, let everyone know. And then what?
Yeah. So Lexi and I, we met at Netflix, and we were on the same team. And one of the things that I've always loved about Lexi is not just she's like a creative genius. I think she's one of the great creatives of our time, but we love working together. We just get each other. We have such a like powerful relationship. We always describe it as like work relationship turned core life relationship. And we just decided we're just going to work together and keep working together.
I love that.
Yeah. So we ended up both going to Clubhouse. So I went to Clubhouse first. She came with me. And after doing that for a little bit, it's just like work kind of felt like we're in this weird transition coming out of the pandemic. Remote work was happening.
And for people who don't know what Clubhouse is, tell them what Clubhouse is.
Clubhouse was a social audio app. It was one of the fastest growing tech startups in the history of tech. In the pandemic, it launched right before the pandemic, and it was a place where, it's like voice is what connected people. And it was on this like meteoric rise. And I was employee number 13, so I'd never been at a startup that early at all, really, and that early. And so, yeah, it was global. There's, millions and millions of users on the platform. I still think there's millions of users on the platform, to be honest. But coming in and trying to build out teams early and start to build the original infrastructure for part of the company. And yeah, Lexi came and we did that together. So we learned a lot about building and product and tech and in such an interesting way. And we decided we wanted to leave and start a company. And so originally we thought we were going to build a company focused on the workplace because we're obsessed with the workplace and we're obsessed with like human dynamics at work and wanting to help people better understand each other. It's always been the mission. We believe the people part of life is the most important part. And we started to go down a path. There was a different company called Manual. And the whole premise was what happens when everybody comes to work with a manual about how they work and what they need in their communication style and their learning style and all these things. And we did that for a little while and then realized that there's like a bigger idea here that is now called Why. And Why is a social network where you answer questions and find your people. And our goal is to help you, get people closer together so that we can have better lives.
Wow. What I love too is, because I don't know if you know, but I'm on the VC side now. And I don't think I knew that.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
so
great.
We invest in companies and
this might be a pitch.
Yeah. Well, it could be. But, I work with startups all the time, and I worked with startups prior. But one of the things you don't see often enough is women founders. And I will say, and this is just statistically true. There's this guy I want to introduce you to. His name is Andy Dunn. He was the founder of Bonobos. And he'll tell you because his wife is a founder and his sister is a founder. He has like the actual data, but just how hard it is for women to raise money, like how much harder it is for women to raise money, how much more they have to pitch, how much more they're turned down. And so the fact that you two are doing this is just inspiring, and there needs to be more women doing such things. And hopefully with more women founding companies and disrupting things, it makes it easier for the other women founders, and so you're paving a way. And so I'm proud of you for that.
Well, women VCs are really important too, right? I mean, we really met very, very few. We have amazing investors, and they are great. And I think we really gravitated towards. We heard a lot of stories from from male founders who said, we pitched 100 different VCs, and we didn't take that route. We did not hit the pavement with as many people as we possibly could. We instead focused on like really spending time getting to know and building relationships with people who were really aligned with our specific vision, and also some firms who were focused on underrepresented founders.
Right.
And, I think but even in that space, there's still a lot of men. So thank you for doing what you're doing, because it needs to be on both sides.
You're welcome. Well, it's been fun. It's been an interesting time to be an investor, but I think, the part I love about it is, of course, you're looking at a market and you're looking at models, but you're really betting on a team.
That's
For sure.
what we keep hearing is it's really about, I mean, it goes back to this idea that it's about people. And our very first investor, by the way, was Sydney Holland. She's our first angel.
So for those that don't know, Cindy Holland's a longtime Netflix person who we all love. Who we all love.
She gave us our very first check. And that put us on the path, right? Because I think in investing, a lot of times it's like, well, do you have traction? Who else is invested? And so her lending her name to us in that way, like, it meant a lot. It still means a lot. I could like cry thinking about it.
Oh, I could cry.
I know.
That's so sweet.
It's really like, you just need somebody to take a chance.
Yeah.
So we started raising money in 2023, which apparently was like the worst year to start to raise.
Not a good one.
Oh, I'm so happy that we're starting a business this year. Yeah. But we were really fortunate. We ended up raising 1.65 million for a pre-seed round. And so, we're in the thick of it. We're building, I think we originally had this intention that we're like, we want to really improve the workplace because we had such a good experience at Netflix, like at work. It was like, it was a dream. Yeah. And how could we help other people do that? And then I think through that work, we realized that the most impactful thing we can do to help improve the workplace is actually build a really incredible company that then can be a model and can be a source of inspiration and aspiration for other people. Yeah. Because even when we still tell people, one of our engineers, we told him, obviously he knows we came from Netflix, and he was like, man, I really wanted to get in there, because it was like, it was the thing, it was the place. So,
well, I think Patty will always say you have to be a great place to be from. Right. And Netflix is a great place to be from.
Yeah. It's a great place. Even afterwards, we talk about the alumni network from Netflix is also, I think, top tier in terms of workplace. So I think, and as we're so early stage, we're pre-seed and we're pre-product market fit. We're still figuring our thing out. But now I have so much even more reverence for how do you want to build a company at all? Start hard, but then also building one that people love, that they love the product, and then also doing one where the culture is also fantastic. It's like, that feels like starting from scratch. It's like, how did they do this? Yeah. How did you guys do that? This is crazy.
A lot of hard work. I talk to all these founders and CEOs, and there's not one founder or leader or CEO that will say culture is not important. That will say talent. Everybody says it. Philosophically, everybody gets it's important. I think the challenge really is doing the work.
Yes.
Right? Because you have to do the work. And for many people, it's work they've never done. It's uncomfortable work because maybe it's more about feedback or behavior or things that, they're not that good at. And they're much better at focusing on revenue or product. And that's where they feel comfortable. And so they look for other people to invest in this, but they don't. And what happens is, because, every company you walk into has a culture manifesto or, deck, whatever you want to call it. And what employees do is they read that, maybe they go and work there. And when they do go and work there, they're watching and they're studying and they're looking for the hypocrisy, right? They're looking for it not to be true. They're looking for it to be true, right? But they're also looking for it not to be true, right? You say we value transparency. Well, you're not transparent at all. Right? You say we value feedback. So the hard part is the living. And I think, one of the things that we did well at Netflix was we really did try to live it. Yeah. And I think we were very lucky that we had Reed because but he wasn't always the best, and he had to, it's true. He'll tell you, he had to work at it, and he, by the time you got him versus when I had him in 2006, by the time you had him, he was a very different leader. He was still great in 2006, but he was constantly pushing himself to be better. And when he started Netflix, kind of like what you two are doing, he wanted to build a great company. Right. And he wanted to focus on the culture because in the other companies he had founded, he didn't. And so, and he didn't like working there, and he'll tell you. You probably saw this Maya, but like if we were in a meeting with the C-level crew and we were talking about something, and we decided that we weren't going to do X anymore, he'd literally walk out of the meeting and he would never do X again. Like that minute.
It's like, we're done.
I mean, he would change his behavior in that minute. And because he changed his behavior in that minute, his leaders changed their behavior. Then their leaders changed their behavior.
It's all
and then their teams changed their behavior. And it was so forth. And so that's for you two in founding this company. You have to do it better and more than anyone.
Right. I think the modeling is so important, leading by example. And I think when I came into Netflix and seeing like, oh, Reed doesn't have an office and he'll literally just like come sit next to you, or, that idea that like, you got to make bets. I remember Lexi and I were working on essentially building out a new strategy for our team and trying to build something new that hadn't existed in Netflix. And one of the things we wanted to do was like a big campaign to announce it. It was like cost millions of dollars. And we bumped into each other in the cafeteria, and he was like, I heard you're spending millions of dollars on something that I don't think is going to work. And it's like, that's the CEO saying that. And it was like, yeah, no, I think it's a good idea. And he was like, well, you get to make the bet. I just don't think it's going to work. Right. But that
did it work?
It did work. Yay! It did work, by the way. Reed, we ended up going on a QBR tour talking about how well it worked. But the whole point was like the idea that the culture actually matched the living. That's the part that was revolutionary.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think many a person in that conversation with a Reed would have said, oh, he doesn't think it's going to work, so I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
But you did, and this is, I think, a good thing for leaders in general to listen to. But what was it about that conversation with Reed, even though he was negative on it, that made you feel okay to take that bet anyways?
Well, I will say that it actually, the initial encounter was like, oh shit. Like, am I going to get in trouble? That was the first, am I about to get fired? Like, that was really what I thought. It wasn't until I went to another leader, two leaders. I had two dual reports. So Eric Pallotta.
Yep.
And
love Eric.
And Shauna Spenley.
Love Shauna.
Where I was like, I just had this moment with Reed. Like, should I be worried? And they both were like, no, you get to take the bet. You get to take the bet. You get to take the bet. Yeah. And so it was, to your point, like, Reed modeled it. He said the first thing, which was, don't do it. Well, I don't think it's a good idea, but like, go for it. And then I kept asking people like, is it okay? Is it okay? Is it okay? And they were like, no, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
And so as long as you learn from it, right? Like we had all those things.
Yeah.
And so it really was, everybody understood the operating principles of the business. And I think as Lexi and I are doing this, like we talk about this all the time. Nobody talks about this part of building where in the beginning you have a really good idea, right? And everybody has great ideas. And really, even in investing in VC, you can raise money on an idea.
Right.
And then as you keep going, it's really about, okay, do you have the traction and all the things to keep going to prove out the idea? But there's something in this middle phase where there's like a restraint and a patience that's required to let the thing do its work and to let the data come in and do all those things. And as we're thinking about culture, we're thinking about all the time, one, what do we want? What do we desire in terms of the kind of workplace we want to be in? But then also what's already here, like what's already naturally happening.
Right.
And how do we codify that? Like, is that our values? Do we like this? Do we not like this? So it's so iterative. It's this constant balance between desire of what you want, but also like, this is what we're naturally doing.
Yeah.
And as founders, like it really is going to flow out of us, you know? So it just requires like a different level of hyper self-awareness, but also emotional maturity to really be honest around like, well, this part of me is still like, I need to deal with this part of me and not bring that to the company.
Right.
And if I don't do that, then that's what's going to be in the company. Right. And so it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
So Lexi, how many people are you guys now? How many employees?
Four full-time. Okay. And then we have probably another 4 contractors that we're working with on a more short-term basis. But it's me, Maya, and 2 engineers.
Okay, cool. And so the fact that you're thinking about this with its you two and two others, really, and some contractors.
We think about it when it's just the two of us. Like,
yeah, it's great because, I think, a lot of companies that I advise, they don't start thinking about this until they're, close to 100. And then they're like, oh, but even at that point, the culture is taking a life of its own. And so if you don't, it's sort of like a living, breathing organism, right? And if you don't take care of it, it's going to grow in a way maybe that you don't want it to grow. And so I love that you're paying attention and that you're being intentional about it, even at a very small early stage.
Yeah. I mean, I think that any group of more than one person has a culture, but even one person has an internal culture. You have a way that you think about yourself and the way that your thoughts are structured. A marriage has a culture, a friendship has a culture, a friendship group has a culture. Certainly a company of 4 has a culture. It's never not there. And I think for us, we've tried to do some of the codification stuff that we would have done at Netflix that we tried to do at Clubhouse. And it's really, you'd think it would be, okay, you start by writing it down and then you do it, but it actually goes the opposite way, like Maya said. So it's really noticing how we're showing up, how we're interacting, what are the sort of natural dynamics, what do we like about that, what do we not like about that. And I think the only thing of anything that we've tried to write down, the only thing that I think really has stayed true and I feel is really foundational is this idea of it's okay to care about the experience and to do things for the sake of the experience and what it feels like to be at work. And are we having a good time? Are we having fun? That's a valuable question. That's a productive question. That's a meaningful business question. And that's the kind of culture we're going to be is, to not just think about, I would say not just think about outcomes, but think about the experience. Actually, I don't even want to present that as a dichotomy. Think about experience as an outcome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the interesting thing is that when you are working on something that you're passionate about, and when you're doing it with a team of people that you respect and are challenged by, and you do it in an environment that allows for you to show up as the best that you can, it actually is fun.
It is.
It's fun.
Well, that's the real reason why we're doing this, because we were both well, I'm not going to go work with anybody else. So we're just going to have to do something, the two of us.
Well, I think that's interesting too, because I think a lot of people that grew up or were at Netflix for a good amount of time, it's hard to go another place. And y'all went to Clubhouse, and I'm sure it was a great organization. However, very different from an operating perspective than Netflix, and very early, and probably, and excuse my language, but probably more like a shit show than okay. And not to talk badly, but this is every company at that
version
stage
of it that wouldn't have been. I mean, we're a shit show now, right?
Yeah.
It's it's normal, and I think they were trying, but
and they're trying.
People have here's the thing: people have really good intentions, but this is hard work to build environment and to build a culture. And I mean, Clubhouse in particular was such an interesting place to be, to come into a place that hadn't really thought about culture,
right?
But also had so much attention. The moment Clubhouse broke out, it was you had every platform coming for it. Facebook wants to do audio rooms, Twitter Spaces, Spotify, everybody's now doing audio. It was the most written about startup. So in terms of the expectation and perception that was building around it, you have investors in your ear, you have millions of users, you have all of us employees. I have so much respect now for founders, because we're always just bitching as employees, this needs to happen and this needs to happen.
Well, let's talk about that too.
I should apologize to you actually now that I'm building something, but it's
your apologies taken.
I'm sorry for being annoying as an employee, but it's just it's one of those things where you don't know until you're in the seat, what it requires. And so Clubhouse, it was Paul and Rohan had beautiful intentions.
Yeah.
It was just, there were so many things that had to happen that it's now got it. You're right. It has a life of its own. And then I think the difference between the culture that's here versus the culture that you want, and sometimes those things just don't align unless you literally make decisions. It's how are you holding people accountable to this culture, right? It's whatever you hold people accountable to is kind of what the culture is.
Exactly.
So So we learned a lot about that. And yeah, I mean, I think even now, I just think environment is the superpower, because it's like you take a plant out of soil, it dies. You take a fish out of water, it can't survive.
Right.
And so I think for a lot of people, what we're starting to realize, and what, in our own research and just understanding of the workplace, it's like, you don't even know what ideas can be birthed if the environment's not proper. You don't even know what people are capable of if the environment is not like proper soil. And so we've spent such an inordinate amount of time focusing on the environment, because we believe that all future ideas, like the success of our business, is going to come from having an environment where an engineer and, our guys, Cody and Cam, like they feel so safe, they feel so seen, they feel so supported, they're having a great time. That's when we're going to actually figure out how to like build the right business, not when we feel stressed and overwhelmed, whatever. So that's why we're indexing so hard, because it's just like, I think environment is the superpower.
It's the only moat.
I think it is too. But I think the thing that my other piece of advice for you too is that as you grow, right, and you're in your soil, you're a seedling,
babies,
and then you're a sort of young tree to a mature tree with like, that's 10 feet, 12 feet tall, right? The way that you take care of that soil and what you use to nurture it changes. And so, the evolution of your company, now that you're 4, and then when you're 100, and then when you're 200, the way that you operate will change and be different. And so I think that's the thing that can catch companies off guard too, is that they kind of get hung up in operating the same way that they were operating when they were 10 people, but now they're 50, and the things that you did at 10 don't work at 50. And the things that you do at 50 don't work at 200. And so you just have to constantly be tweaking it and this was the other thing I think that we did pretty well at Netflix, is that we were very honest about what worked and what didn't. And we changed it, right? And so it was, this constant evolution of like, how do we become better? How do we become better? How do we become better? And, we would comb through our culture deck and be like, okay, what's not work, and it would be an exercise that the whole company would end up being a part of,
Yeah.
So I think that's the other thing to just pay attention to.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something that we're very wary of and don't know how to, whatever.
Well,
at this point,
okay.
like we absolutely pray to get to that point to even have that problem on our hands, but it is, it's crazy how much every single person changes the culture so much at this stage, right? So even from 4 to 5, if we get to hire another employee soon, that'll be a huge
It changes
change.
the dynamic. Totally.
Very, very big dynamic shift. And it's so sensitive, but it reminds me of like, what was just happened where somebody left a bag of Cheetos in a cave, and now the cave is like ruined because like the Cheetos, the tiny bit of dust in the empty bag just like completely messed up the ecosystem. You got to always be looking out for Cheeto bag, but it's, I think it's, I guess I'd be curious to hear your take on it, but like how do you have the wisdom of like, what is something that you should hold on to, that you should be really stubborn about, even to the point of being annoying, even as growth seems to be resisting that value, versus what do you let go of? And how do you know the difference between one that's fundamental and one that's not?
Well, and I think that's an excellent question. So I think the things that are foundational, you tend not to lose. So if you think about Netflix, we were always about freedom and responsibility.
Right.
And that was our foundation that was our soil, or the foundation of the house in which we built upon, right? And so we had that strong core thing that we always came back to, but how we approached freedom at different levels, right? And how we held people accountable at different levels of growth or scale of the company were different, right? So you'd have to go back and say, okay, well, the expense philosophy is spend the company's money if it was your own.
Right.
And does that work now? Right. And, you and I know that they got to a point where they're like, oh, I don't think it works anymore. When they were like,
the phone charger
12,000
cabinet
people.
was a crazy idea.
I know. But I think we, at Netflix, we tested those limits. Right. Yeah. And I was always a believer in if people have the right context, right, and they are trusted, and you say, hey, here's the framework, you make the decision. 99 times out of 100, I think they're going to make the right decision. Occasionally, they're going to make the wrong decision. And I was never one of the people that like went to the, charger box thing and took a million charger. But there's people that do that. But I think that I was always in the camp of that was rare. Right. Yeah. And you can just let those people go because they don't fit in the culture anyways. Right. And so I think the challenge is for businesses, and I think this is just a watch out for you two, is that as you grow, what happens is companies try to control the chaos with rules. So let's take the iPhone refrigerator box, whatever. It was like a vending machine for anything you wanted Apple.
Any charging device you ever needed for any Apple device was in a vending machine.
Yes.
To call it a vending machine, there's more guardrails on a vending machine. It was just like,
you could just take it. You didn't need a credit card. You didn't need money. And I think that, as you're growing and scaling your culture, people have to understand, okay, I'm trusting you to make a good decision about this vending machine. Right. And why? Right. And what happens is, then companies say, okay, well, everybody's taking the charger. So now we got to lock it up.
Yeah.
Right. Or we got to have a rule, like you can only have one charger every 6 months, or you know what I mean? And so then that's what companies try to do, is they try to control the chaos and making rules to do it versus saying, here's the context, here's the the framework in which you should make a decision. I trust you to make the right one. Because what happens over time is that, the vending machine's not the problem anymore. Now it's something else, but now you've had all these rules about this. And so, and now you want people to do this other thing and they're not doing it because they're still doing the vending machine rule.
Well, and I think it's one of those things where it's a lot easier to make rules than it is to reset norms. And that takes a lot longer, and it's expensive to go through that process if you're still having, misuse of the vending machine throughout that time. And I can understand why it doesn't happen, but like, I think it's the same with a country's culture or, with like a family culture and how like people behave in a household. It's just like, rules don't really do it. I feel like a common example of this reference is in Japan, nobody jaywalks. I don't think that there's necessarily stricter punishment or more enforcement of jaywalking laws. It's just not done. People
don't do
walk always on the correct side and wait in line in a different way and whatever. And that's
also part of the culture. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. In the broader sense of the word. And it's just, and when you were talking about, when employees first join and they're comparing the document to real life, no matter what the document says, even if it's not hypocritical or what matters is the behaviors that they see modeling around them. If their boss is going to the vending machine, why would they resist? Because they're also the bigger you get, you're further alienated.
I'm going to take 6.
I'm going to take 6. Yeah. I mean, I think because I remember I've been pulling out Reed's book recently. As
No Rules, which I spent a lot of my life on, but
yes. And he said something where it's like when you are a company focused on innovation, you have to lead through context. When you are a company where it's like there's a lot more risk involved, you lead by control.
Right. Like if you're a pharmaceutical company or
you gotta lead by a lot more controls.
You can't go off vibes for pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. Right. Whatever you feel.
Yeah. I think the leading by context not control. If I had to choose one of the principles that I felt like was the most impactful principles for me, that's the one.
Yeah.
Because the idea that it's like, and Oprah used to say, this is how I know it's universal, because Oprah used to say this too. She would be like, trust people enough to tell them the truth.
Yeah.
And that's just all about context. Like, let me explain to you why certain things are happening or what's going on and all of that. And it's like, oh, if I have the information, I feel empowered to make a different decision.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite one. And I think for us, we're trying to build a company. Like our whole desire is for people to have good relationships.
Right.
So for us, the whole social experience is about questions. That's the only form of content on why, our questions. So the whole goal is for you to answer more questions. So for us, that means I think we're going to have to be people who value curiosity as a company, right?
Yes, absolutely.
There also needs to be a connection between what you're building and how you're moving in the company, because it all flows through you. So like, that's really important to us. I think the other thing is, you know, the longest running study on human happiness that Harvard did talks about the number one quality that determines a good life are the quality of your relationships. So we are trying to build a platform that helps you get closer together so that you have better relationships in your lives. So I think that also means we have to value like the relationships we're building as a team, right? That we're actually growing closer.
Yeah.
And so it is this interesting thing where it's like, as we start to figure out more of what we're doing and our value proposition and our why, literally from a product standpoint, there's also implications for like, well, is that happening here first? Because, you know, I feel like at Netflix, what was so fun is you did have a team of people across every department for the most part who also loved entertainment. Like we loved television and film and we're so passionate about it. We really wanted to be a part of something so innovative. And so then it's like how we're moving is innovative. You know, it's like it all was so intertwined. And I think I didn't realize that for most people, they never actually get that experience at work to feel what it feels like, to feel like it's all integrated and to feel like there's high integrity in what you're doing, what you're saying, and how you're moving and what you're building. And I think that it's honestly such a privilege, and it shouldn't be something where, you know, only a small group of people get to experience that, because like, that's what great work is. It's like who I am, how we move, what we do is all aligned. And then it's like, I'm in my flow. I'm like in my creative genius. And it's like, we're producing, and it's like, oh my God, it's like the most amazing thing. And so when we were originally focused on the workplace, that was like the original insight was we spend about 60 to 70% of our lives at work. And so if you aren't having a good experience at work, it's nearly impossible to have a good life.
Yeah.
And I think that's a hard thing for us to admit, that like work, our lives do center around work. There's no way for it not to.
Yeah.
And so we've like kind of compartmentalized like, well, I'm going to put work over here and I'm going to be over here. And I think that's just the wrong approach. It's like we need more scrutiny on the culture part of things, because when it clicks, it really does become like, I mean, Lexi and I talk about this all the time. We use that team that we had at Netflix as like a measuring stick for us, because it's like, we like the people we were working with. We were creative. We were, it was almost like we had almost like our own microculture within the bigger culture, which is, I think, also one of the things that Netflix kind of allowed for. It's like, okay, here are like the big operating principles, but then as a team, you got to figure out what works for your team so that you can produce the best work. And so we've experienced, so we know what it feels like. And I think that's so special, because then we know what it doesn't feel like.
Yeah.
And when you know what it doesn't feel like, it's like, okay, something's off. But if you've never had that opportunity, you don't even know what you're missing.
No, you don't know.
And that makes me really sad.
All right, everyone, time for another career confession. Lexi, Maya, are you guys up for this?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
Okay. So, more than just a personality hire. That's the title of this question. I was always a bit of a class clown at school and in college, but never let it affect my grades or work ethic. And now in my workplace, I consider myself to still be one. Mm-hmm. When I started, a coworker would make jokes at my expense, and I would always go along with it. But now I fear it's hurting my chances of being taken seriously for a promotion. Mm. How do I tell them to stop treating me like I'm an idiot in front of everyone else without making things awkward and too serious? I still want to be in on the jokes and making people laugh. How do I balance that with making myself look like a senior management type material?
Well.
Yeah, Lexi, I feel like you should start answering with this one.
Well, I think there's two levels to this. So first, on a personal level, this person, you're allowed to be hurt by that, and you are allowed to stick up for yourself and say to that person, you're just hurting my feelings straight up, if that is the case. Without, being in this situation, I would say it's not a given that being sort of the butt of the joke in a public setting means that you don't look like senior management, because usually people won't do that to somebody who is perceived to be on the downside of the relationship. it would look bad for somebody to make fun of somebody who it's perceived as they're punching down. If they're doing that to you, it probably means that you're already perceived as being on the higher up side of the relationship. So, I don't think it's necessarily something you need to worry about. That doesn't mean that you can't be upset by it and shouldn't do something about it for that reason. But I think you can, if you want, you can distinguish those things.
Interesting. Okay.
Oh,
Maya?
That's interesting. What I heard was, I want to be in a position of leadership, but I'm worried that who I am and how I'm showing up will keep me from being in that position. That's kind of what I'm interpreting from the question.
I heard and then they have this person sort of reiterating that's how they are. Yeah.
Okay. So 2 things that come to me. It's just one, I think the idea that leadership looks a certain way is something that we should challenge, because I think I just have reverence for people's unique creative genius and how they show up. And so somebody who's like funny and the class clown and bringing levity to a situation is very important. And you need that also in leadership positions, because they are the people, one who can be super relatable, really accessible, lighten the mood, take out tension. There's just a lot of pros that come from having that kind of personality. I'm not that person. So like, I have reverence for whoever this person is. So one, my advice would be, don't change who you are to become a leader. Instead, figure out what kind of leader you want to be and start being that today. So that this is something that we used to hear a lot, which is like, everyone's a leader. The most important person you'll ever lead is you. So start by leading yourself and thinking as a leader in the situation, how would a leader handle this situation?
Right.
And so if I were in that position, whoever is the one who's making fun of me, first of all, no, but it's like,
shut your trap.
I would pull them aside and speak from the truth, which is, when you do this, it hurts my feelings. And I don't know if you have the awareness that this is happening. If the person continues to do it after you tell them that it's bothering you, that's a different situation. But I would offer, have you tried that first? And 2, don't think you have to change who you are to become a leader. The best leaders are very much themselves. And that's what makes them great leaders.
Which, listen, I'm a bit kind of a jokey person. So, I like to joke around.
Yeah.
And, I did get the feedback earlier in my leadership career that I needed to joke around less. So, which I didn't. No.
I was going to say,
but because, I can't help myself. I mean, I'm just, I like a little joke here and there. And, I think we take ourselves and our situations too seriously. It's like, okay, we're not saving lives here. This isn't brain surgery. Like,
Right.
And I do think, you do need a tactful way of lightening things. And I learned how to do that better over time. And probably earlier in my career, I was a bit inappropriate, I'm sure. And so maybe, this person needs to think about that too, because, and maybe this person that is making fun of them is making fun of them because they already are jokey. So they're like, they're going to be fine with me joking around with them this way.
Right.
But it's also, and I agree with you both on not to change who you are, because I didn't. I stayed authentic to myself. But I also had to think about how I wanted people to perceive me. Right. And, Patty taught me this a long, long time ago. And I don't remember what I was talking to her about, but I was complaining about something somebody had said, or some feedback that I had gotten. And she said, well, and I said, that's not the case at all. And she said, perception's reality, honey. Right. So if it's not the case at all, but then you're hearing this, it's still being perceived that way. So I think, oftentimes people misread us. People, they maybe, you're interacting with team members that you don't know that well, right? Like maybe you've only had like one meeting with them and it's too comfortable, or, it's too inappropriate. I don't know. But I think, we as leaders, and I think Maya, you made a good point, like think about the leader you want to be. And I had to think about, like, do I want to be the leader that is just the jokey, fun leader? Or do I want people to see me as that, and I'm a hardcore, badass, business woman who can, tangle with anyone else in this room that's higher level than me or smarter than me. Like, I wanted both, right? And so I think this person has to think about perception, and do they want to just be the jokey person, or do they want to be the jokey person and the great business person, great leader? And you can be all of them.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the point. It's like, it's not just be yourself. It's like, don't assume that part of you is in contradiction with being a leader. And there might be things you want to add into the mix. And there might be, elements of executive presence or whatever that you want to think about. But when, like, the kind of leader you want to be is not just, okay, who's someone you admire? How can you ape that? It's like, what is your version of that, given who you naturally are? Because you could try to suppress that, but you're not going to be as successful as if you found a natural way to channel your gifts.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and also pain. For me, as I thought about like growing in my own leadership, pain was always like a good compass for me around the kind of leader I didn't want to be. And also around how I was clear about things I didn't want people to feel as a result of my leadership. And I think it's like, if you're experiencing this and it's like, this feels painful, that's also an indication around like, it's important to you that people feel safe or whatever that thing is that you're not getting. And like, that's how you start to like acquire your leadership style, is by paying attention to like moments like this, to be like, what is it about this that's bothering me? How do I want to confront it? But also, what can I learn about myself so that, our experiences help shape how we like create space and environment for other people. So best of luck. I mean, I hope they stop doing this. And if not, like, let's run up. No,
like, let us know. Let us know how it goes. All right. Well, thank you, ladies, for doing this confession with me. And thank you, everybody, for listening. If you want to leave us a confession, there's a link in the show notes. So go there and do that. And don't forget to hit follow and don't miss an episode.
Thanks for listening to Truth Works. This episode was produced and edited by Megan Hayward. Thank you to Kathleen Speckert and the whole Edit Audio team.